Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation on social lifecycle assessment of mobility services, state of the art. My name is Katharina Gompf and I am presenting this study also in the name of my co-authors, Marzia Traverso and Jörg Hetterich. Since this is an online presentation, I included a picture of myself to give you an idea who is actually talking to you right now. Some information about myself. I'm a PhD student based in Munich, Germany, and I am supervised by RWTH Aachen University. And my PhD is done in cooperation with the BMW Group. I structured this presentation in 5 parts, as you can see here on the left side. I will start with a short introduction that leads to the research questions. I will continue with the methodology of the study and the results. And I will finish with a conclusion and further research. So as you all know, growing population and continuing urbanization leads to major problems in cities around the world. Space is limited, and with rising number of cars, long traffic jams, and declining air quality are only some of the results. At the same time, digitalization allows new business models, and more mobility services are available that can be booked on demand. Car sharing, ride-hailing, or scooter sharing are just some examples, and the company names you can see here on the slide are also just few examples. There are many local solutions worldwide that connect people and give users the opportunity to share mobility services and different means of transportation. The big question that automatically arises is, can these different mobility services like car sharing or scooter sharing positively contribute to the quality of life in cities? What are the effects of these services and how can these effects be measured? Which indicators do you need for the evaluation? Which indicators are there already? And what kind of data is necessary? What kind of data is even available? Taking all this into account, the overall question is, which indicators can be suggested for the assessment of mobility services? To answer this question, the obvious first step is to look at the Universität guidelines and the SLCA handbook. Two well-known internationally recognized documents that suggest many different indicators for the assessment of social aspects. When it comes to analyzing mobility services, the use phase plays an important role. The indicators provided in these two documents are a very good basis. However, when it comes to the evaluation of the use phase, the categories and indicators stated in here in these two documents are not enough to capture all use phase impacts of mobility services. What I would also like to point out is that when you compare the subcategories and social topics provided by the guidelines and the SLCA handbook, as it is done here for the stakeholder groups, local community, and user or consumer, some categories are identical, as for example, community engagement, as you can see here on the second line. And other subcategories or social topics are just named differently or grouped differently, but still measuring the same aspects, as for example, health and safety in the case of the guidelines, or health and safety studied separately in the case of the SLCA handbook. However, other categories are mentioned in one document but not in the other, as for example, feedback mechanism stated in the guidelines but not in the SLCA handbook, and inclusiveness, for example, is stated in the SLCA handbook but not in the guidelines. So consequently, the question is, which indicators should be chosen when it comes to analyzing mobility services, and especially regarding local community and user that are in the focus analyzing the use phase. In order to find suitable indicators and to choose the right indicators for the assessment of mobility services, a systematic literature review was conducted in 4 phases, as you can see here. So in the first phase, a keyword search was done using various combinations of SLCA or social lifecycle assessment in combination with mobility, mobility service, transportation system, sustainable city, and indicator. With this keyword search, almost 580 indicators were identified in 51 publications. So really a lot of indicators. In the second phase, all these different identified indicators were allocated to affected stakeholder groups using the 5 stakeholder groups suggested in the UNIPSETA guidelines, so local community, society, consumer, worker, and value chain actors. You can see the distribution here on the top right. At the same time, it was also identified whether the indicator is of qualitative, quantitative, or semi-quantitative nature. Sometimes a clear assessment method was not stated. In this case, it was classified as not identified. A great majority of indicators were quantitative, in total 63%, whereas only 10% were of qualitative nature. In the third phase, the identified indicators were filtered based on 2 criterions. The first is the indicator needs to be relevant, obviously, for the assessment of mobility services and reflect the performance in relation to sustainable mobility, or to sustainable urban mobility. The second criterion is that the indicator needs to be measurable. For the indicator to be measurable, 3 aspects were defined that needed to be fulfilled. First is the indicator is already being measured or can be measured with little extra effort. The measurement will show change over time, for example, for over a year. And the measurement results can be compared to the results of other mobility services. So comparability is also an important aspect. On the basis of this analysis, a core set of indicators was defined in the fourth phase. You see here on the right side the categories defined for the stakeholder groups, local community, and user. You find here some of the categories and social topics as suggested by the guidelines and the SLCA handbook, as for example, community engagement, inclusiveness, or feedback mechanism. However, there are also new categories like noise pollution or space occupancy. Unfortunately, there's only limited time for this presentation, so I cannot go into detail to discuss every category and underlying indicator with respective assessment method. It was also defined in the study. However, if you have questions regarding specific indicators or also general questions, please feel free to contact me afterwards. So as an overall conclusion, we can say that the UNIPSETA guidelines and the SLCA handbook offer many different indicators and substantially contributed to the progress in SLCA. However, regarding the evaluation of the use phase, there is still uncertainty. As the use phase plays an important role for the assessment of mobility services, a systematic literature review was carried out in 4 phases to identify suitable indicators and to propose a core set of indicators for the assessment of mobility services. The major difficulties were the lack of clearly defined assessment methods as well as missing data. The obvious next step now is the application of the defined core set of indicators to a mobility service case study to validate the applicability and to verify the proposed indicators. Part of further research could also be a weighting of the indicators to prioritize certain aspects, and of course, the results from the social assessment can be combined with an environmental assessment for a holistic evaluation of mobility services, which should be the end goal. And when doing so, special attention should be paid to indicators that might already be included in the environmental dimension, as for example, indicators evaluating air quality to avoid double counting. So yes, this is it from my side. Thank you for listening. And as I already said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.